All right, welcome back for another video with me. So when the cold months are coming, I think that there's a lot of people that are used to seeing the birds flock. A lot of times they're getting ready to head down south. So once you see the birds heading down south, that's a sign, especially here in Michigan, that colder weather is coming. Though not all birds fly in flocks. We actually have the smallest migrating bird. Do you have any ideas what that is? It's the hummingbird. So the hummingbird actually does migrate down south to get away from the cold weather. So the thing about the hummingbird is they don't typically travel in a flock. Typically they travel alone. And they even will travel up to 500 miles in one flight. So before they even take a rest. So that's pretty amazing. So I think that if I drove 500 miles in a car, I would need a little bit of a break. And I tell you what, it's probably a lot easier, I could imagine, sitting in my car and just holding my driving steering wheel rather than flapping my wings at an insanely high rate, right? So some hummingbirds will even travel over 2,000 miles twice a year. So over 4,000 miles there and returning home. That is a super long way to fly. So not only do they usually fly by themselves, it's really rare to find them in a flock. But if you do spot them in a flock, you can call them a bouquet, a glittering, a hover, a shimmer, or a tune. So those are all the different little things that you can call a flock of hummingbirds. So if you have yet to figure out what I'm going to talk about today, obviously I would like to talk about hummingbirds. So I looked up some information about hummingbirds, and I just want to tell you all about it because some of it's pretty awesome and pretty cool. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump right to it. So the name hummingbird comes from, you'd probably guessed it, the noise that their wings make when they flap. They flap so quickly it sounds like a humming noise. If you've ever been around hummingbirds, they definitely have the right name. Their wings are actually really loud, especially when they get close to you. So hummingbirds can fly at an average speed of 25 to 30 miles per hour. It doesn't seem that fast, right? But they're also able to dive. So once they dive and come back up, when they dive, they can gain speeds anywhere from 50 to 60 miles per hour. So think about it if you're driving along in your car on a backcountry road. A lot of those country roads are 55 miles per hour. So if you stay going straight and keep with the speed limit, eventually that bird's gonna go out of sight because it's gonna outfly you. Pretty amazing, right? So they are definitely known for their erratic or their quick movements. This is because their wings actually flap or beat at 50 times per minute, or per second, excuse me. Per minute doesn't sound that long, but per second, 1 Mississippi. Think about it. That was 1 second, right? That's the trick I was always taught. By the time I got done saying 1 Mississippi, they already flapped their wings 50 times, which is just insane and crazy. If they were people, they would definitely have big guns, right? They'd have muscles. They must have strong wings for all of that. So while a hummingbird flies fast, its heart also beats insanely fast. So their heart beats 1,260 beats per minute. That's insane. If you're someone that regularly gets your heartbeat checked, you would know that there's no way that we could ever make our hearts beat that fast. And their lifespan is only actually 5 years. But there have actually been some hummingbirds found that have lived over 10 years. So they're pretty awesome, amazing little birds. I'm not really sure how much about hummingbirds we really know. So another thing is, did you know that hummingbirds are the only bird that's able to fly backwards? So not only can they fly up and forward, they can go sideways, and back. That's pretty amazing. I couldn't even run backwards. So the fact that they're able to fly at speeds that they can backwards is pretty awesome. It's something that is just a big feat. So Hummingbirds, they actually have a great memory. So their brains actually make up 4.2% of their entire body weight. So if you were to put this little thing on a scale, guess what? 4.2% of its whole entire weight comes from its brain. So considering how small a hummingbird is, in comparison, they actually have the largest brain out of any bird. So it's the biggest part or biggest organ in their body. Remember, our brain's an organ. So not only are they very smart and have large brains, they have very good memories. They typically remember every flower and every feeder that they've ever been to. I don't know about you, but sometimes I can't remember what I ate for dinner 2 days ago, let alone every place I've ever eaten in my whole life and where those places were at that. Because I must tell you, I have a terrible sense of direction. So hummingbirds, because they have this good memory, there's a lot of people that really do enjoy feeding hummingbirds. So I just want to make sure people kind of think about that for a little bit. I'm telling you that hummingbirds have quite amazing memories. So if you begin feeding a hummingbird, make sure you keep up with it, because if it can't find food elsewhere, it's gonna come to your bird feeder. So make sure that if you begin, you be responsible and you continue feeding your hummingbirds. So they actually have very good color vision. So I thought this was pretty amazing. I found out that hummingbirds actually see in ultraviolet. So if you think about it, ultraviolet rays come from the sun, right? We put sunblock on to protect against that. So I'm not exactly sure what seeing in ultraviolet would look like, because obviously I don't see in ultraviolet. But that is supposed to make colors way more vibrant, and they're supposed to be able to see much further and better, clearer as well than any human, which is pretty amazing. So they are very much attracted to bright colors. With this being said, I know a lot of people tend to buy pre-made mix because they are very much attracted to these bright colors, these bright yellow, oranges, and reds. A lot of people will put dye into their sugar water. This is actually not good for your hummingbirds. The best way to do it is to mix your sugar water without adding any preservatives. And wherever you decide to hang your bird feeder, just make sure that there's a lot of really colorful flowers, because that will attract them just as well as red dye inside of their food, which again isn't even good for them. So remember, they like nectar and sweet things. So that's why they'll be attracted to those flowers. They will enjoy the nectar, and they will also very much enjoy the sugar water. So with that being said, they cannot actually smell anything. Okay, so they can't actually smell the flowers, they can't smell the nectar, they can't smell their sugar water. That's where their great memories come into play. And the interesting thing is that most hummingbirds, they actually stay very close to wherever they were hatched. So other than migrating for the wintertime, they typically have a home and they kind of stay in their little area. You know, kind of goes with the saying, there's no place like home. So also, moving a little bit more forward, hummingbirds have pretty cool tongues. They're actually in the shape of a W, okay? So like this. So not only are they in shape of a W, they kind of have little hairs, sort of like a cat does on their tongue. So if you've ever had a cat come up and maybe lick you on your cheek, it's really rough and scratchy, right? So kind of like a cat's tongue, those little grooves and the shape of their tongue really helps a hummingbird to be able to eat quickly. So the thing about it is even though they're very small, if you don't really realize what you're seeing and it's far away, you might miss it or not even realize you saw a hummingbird. They're so tiny. So they can move their tongues in and out about 13 times per second, and they can consume double their body weight, okay, in nectar and just sweet water, which is pretty amazing. They must have pretty expandable stomachs. So if you really think about how small a hummingbird is, they actually weigh less than a nickel. So when you go to the store to get your candy and they say, well, that will be a nickel. Think about holding that nickel and putting it in someone's hand. The weight of that little nickel is going to be the same weight as if a hummingbird actually landed in your hand. So with the small as they are, it would make sense that their nests are small too, right? So the average nest is about the half the size of a dollar coin. So a dollar coin's about that big, right? So they're about maybe that big. Pretty interesting, right? So this is something kind of cool that I found out about hummingbirds. When they lay their eggs are so small, people compare them to white jelly beans or even little coffee beans. So that gives you kind of an idea of how small one of these eggs really are. So not only are their nests small, they usually look for materials like moss and spider webs and anything they find in nature that has the ability to stretch and grow bigger. So even though the typical hummingbird only lays 2 eggs, when their babies grow, the material that they choose to use with their building and their construction of their nests actually allows for not only it to be very safe and sturdy, but for it to grow as the babies grow. So it is definitely a very safe nest. So a baby hummingbird is very small. When they're born, they're roughly about the size of a penny, and they're one of the birds that is not able to fly. So I have a little question for you. Have you ever seen a hummingbird sitting still? Because I can't. This probably is because they actually have extremely weak legs. Their legs aren't really good for much. They're only good for perching and moving back and forth sideways while perching. They don't actually have the ability to hop or to even walk along. So it seems like they're constantly flying. What a tiring life a hummingbird must have. They can't even rest on their legs because they won't support them. So I figured out that there's about 330 species of hummingbirds in North and South America. There are only 3 common species that you might see in the US. They are the rufous, the Anna, and the Calliope hummingbirds. So if you've ever seen one in Michigan or even near Canada, most likely they're one of those 3. So thanks so much for joining me for another chat. Before we say goodbye, I just want to give you guys one more tip. I think hummingbirds are pretty awesome. So here's a tip to make sure your hummingbirds keep coming back. So you should actually clean your hummingbird feeders regularly. It's a good idea to do this once a week. This ensures that mold or salmonella doesn't actually grow in your feeder. And the more fresh water that you change, the fresher it is, the better hummingbirds like it, and the more likely they are to come back. So thank you guys so much for joining me, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys next week. As always, have a good day.